Hi there, I'm Melissa Harker Ridenour, and I'm the author of the book, What Would You Do? A Kid's Guide to Staying Safe in a World of Strangers. It's award-winning. It was a Best Book Awards finalist, and it had 5 stars by readers' favorite. And I'm so glad that you decided to stop by and hear me tell you a little bit about my book. I guess the first thing I should tell you is a little bit about myself. I'm a retired teacher and retired librarian, so I've worked with children K through 12 in the library and taught language arts in middle school and high school. So I have broad experience with children. When I retired from teaching, I decided I wanted to stay involved with children in a way that I could educate them, entertain them, empower them, and motivate them. And so I thought I will do it by writing children's books. And What Would You Do? My Kid's Guide to Staying Safe in a World of Strangers was my first book doing that. I've got 3 other books that do 1 or 2 or the other things, but What Would You Do? A Kid's Guide to Staying Safe in a World, in a World of Strangers actually accomplishes all 4 things. It educates, entertains, empowers, and motivates. That's what it's meant to do. It has to do with strangers because children understanding what a stranger is very important. One of the things I often got asked when I would go to book signings is people would ask me, why would I decide to write such a book? Well, I wrote this book because of a very traumatic experience when I was a 5th grader in elementary school. My very best friend that I walked to school with every day at our grade school when in 5th grade, I would walk past her house and pick her up and we'd walk to school together. And on a Sunday night, Sunday evening, she'd been sent down to the corner store just 1 block away from her house for her mother to pick up something for her mother. And she was grabbed in the alleyway between her house and the store and was murdered, was raped and murdered. And so that was a traumatic experience. It happened on a Sunday evening, and it's always stuck in my mind on Monday morning when my mother had to tell me when I got up that I wouldn't see Charlene that day in school. And I tried to explain what had happened. How do you explain something so violent and something so tragic like that to a 5th grader? I didn't understand that. The only thing I remember from that is every day I would have to walk to school. I had to walk the same path I always did with Charlene. And when I would get to that corner where I knew that her body had been dumped, I would run past that place, just absolutely terrified, my heart pounding. So that had an impact on me. It probably made me an overprotective parent when my children were young. And much to their chagrin, I'm still an overprotective parent. I still worry about them. I try to mother them, even though they're adults with families of their own. It's hard to get past things like that. But that's the reason I wrote the book, because I think it's important for children to have some kind of a medium that they can relate to teach them to be proactive, to know that they can also take a proactive role to stay safe on their own when they're not with their parents, because they can't be with their parents all the time. That's the simple truth of the matter. They can't be with their parents all the time. And it's also a problem for children to understand who to trust and who not to trust, what strangers are. I'll start out by showing you some of the illustrations. It's illustrated by Leslie Failing, and she did very simplistic illustrations that adequately illustrate what goes on in the book. The first chapter, it's divided into 5 chapters. The first one has to do with strangers. The second one has to do is the interactive part, and I'll explain how it's interactive in a few minutes. But the first one, she illustrates a little boy, and he's surrounded by a whole assortment of people. He doesn't know what a stranger is, so it's important to help him understand what a stranger is. So to help you better understand that if this is written, since it's can be kind of a scary topic and parents might think that it's maybe too advanced for their children, it might scare their children. I want you to know, first of all, before I start reading a little bit of this first chapter to show you that it's written in a kid-friendly way, that it's a book that can be read on a 3rd grade level. My granddaughter, when she was in the 3rd grade, read it herself. But it's ideally meant to be a shared experience between a parent and a child, a grandparent and a child, a teacher and a class. Many teachers, schools have purchased this book and have actually taught it in their classrooms as a unit. stranger safety, learning how to take a proactive role to stay safe. They use it to empower children, because that's one of the things, phrases we use in the book, kid power and street smart kid. It's important to help our children learn to be, have kid power and to be a street smart kid, and to learn that they can take a proactive role to stay safe. So just to help you understand that it's not written in a frightening way, it's written in a kid-friendly way that will make your child feel comfortable and not uneasy at all. And you as the parent will then feel comfortable and not uneasy at all as well. Here's how the first chapter, What is a Stranger, starts. The world seems like a scary place sometimes, doesn't it? You hear adults talking about bad things that happen. That can be pretty frightening to a child in a grown-up world. You hear about war, terrorists, you hear about killer storms. Sometimes you even hear news reports about child abductions. Do you know what it means to be abducted? If a child is abducted, it means he is taken against his will by someone. The abductor might harm him or ask him to do something that may make him feel uncomfortable. Most children who are abducted are returned safely. A smart and tough team of police officers and special police from the FBI, that means Federal Bureau of Investigation, carefully look for them. Nevertheless, hearing stories of such things can be terrifying. Don't worry. Our country is doing everything it can to protect you from terrorists, natural disasters, and storms. Your parents will try to protect you from any kind of harm or threat from a possible abductor. And you will learn in this guidebook that you can take an active part in protecting yourself as well. Possibly you have heard some adults use the expression stranger danger. This is really not a very good thing to say. It might make you think that all strangers are bad and dangerous. The truth is that most people, including most strangers, are good. But some people, including some strangers, aren't good. Wouldn't it be terrific if you could tell the bad people from the good people? But you can't always tell such a thing. Therefore, you must learn to be careful around all strangers. To do this, you must understand what a stranger is and whom to trust. As you get better at doing this, I'm sure the world will seem a whole lot less scary to you. If you were asked to draw a picture of a stranger, what would he or she look like in your drawing? Would he look ugly or mean? Many children describe strangers as people who appear ugly and wicked. Even regular-looking people who seem friendly or kind should be considered strangers to you if you don't know them. Even if a person knows your name, has been around you, talked to you, or someone you have seen before, it doesn't mean you know that person. You should still consider the person a stranger and be careful. Figuring out whom to trust can be really hard to do. One way to make it easier is to think about 3 kinds of people. First, there are people that you don't know at all. Then there are people you just sort of know. Last, there are adults that you and your parents know very well. The adults that you and your parents know very well are the ones you can probably trust. Think about people that you don't know at all and people that you only sort of know as strangers. Be careful around them. Trust only the people your parents say you should trust. Ask mom and dad to tell you the names of at least 3 adults whom you can trust to be your in case of emergency adults. It's important that you know whom you can safely call or go to in case you're unable to reach your parents. Memorize your own address and telephone number. Know how to contact your in case of emergency adults as well. You could call them your ICE support group. ICE is an acronym. It stands for in case of emergency. It would be a good idea also for you and your parents to think of a secret code word to share. It could be a silly sounding secret word like booger or squish. It could even be a made up word like flibberty gibbet. But it should be a word that is easy for you to remember. The next chapter will show you how the secret code word can help to keep you safe. Do you understand better now what a stranger is? Have you and your parents agreed upon your ICE support group? Remember to name at least 3 adults whom you can trust to keep you safe. Have you agreed on a secret code word to share? Remember to keep it a secret. If you have agreed on your ICE support group and your secret code word, you have made a fantastic start. Would you like to learn next what to do if you were faced with something bad or scary? Take the quiz in chapter 2 of the guidebook and read the remaining chapters to learn how to stay safe. chapter 2 is the interactive part of the book. I call it interactive because chapter 2 has 20 of the most commonly used scenarios that a child could face from someone, potentially a potential abductor. The tricks, the 20 most common tricks that a potential abductor would use to try to gain a child's trust. I take all 20 of those scenarios and I present it an ABC choice. What would you do if? And then it gives an ABC choice. For instance, here's the illustration for chapter 2. What would you do? You see, 2 children had been playing with a soccer ball and a stranger stops by in a car and tries to talk to them. They're running away because they're scared. They're doing the right thing. You should get away from somebody that you don't know or feel uncomfortable around. But chapter 2 has 20 such scenarios. For instance, one of them, when I do school workshops, and I remember when I did a safety workshop for the Preston County 4-H Club, at their safety day, they had volunteers there to teach safety in all different aspects of safety. And my particular station was stranger safety. So the children would switch stations. And when the children would come to mind to learn about stranger safety, I like to role play one of the most common scenarios of the 20 scenarios in chapter 2, which is if a child is playing in a park and a stranger comes up and says, "I've lost my puppy dog, will you help me find them?" So when they would come to my group, I would have 2 children role play that scenario. One child would pretend to be the stranger who's lost the puppy, and the other child would be the child playing in the park. And every group that I had role play that scenario failed miserably. Each one of those children would have gone off to help find the puppy. Why not? They like puppies. They've been told to respect their adults and do what adults tell them to do. But that's the absolute wrong thing to do. So that's the type of thing that is presented. What would you do if you're playing in a park and a stranger asks you to find a puppy? And they're given A, B, C choices, and they have to read all 3 choices for each of the 20 scenarios and decide which one is the safest choice and choose that choice. And then the answer is given and explains why it's the correct answer. One of the interesting ones that children always found interesting is because it has to do with being on an elevator. A child should never really be on an elevator alone, but sometimes they're in a situation where maybe they're on vacation at the beach and they have to leave the beach to go up to the hotel room to go to the bathroom or something, and they're on the elevator alone. And if somebody would be on the elevator with them, if they feel uncomfortable. For instance, here's the illustration of that. Child's on an elevator alone and somebody's on there that he starts to feel somewhat uncomfortable. The child knows if they feel uncomfortable with somebody. They have this like inner sense of radar in their tummy that tells them something doesn't feel right here. For some reason, I don't know why, but some reason I don't feel comfortable. Their inner radar goes off. If a child will be on an elevator alone and if for some reason they start to feel uncomfortable with that stranger that's on there alone, the scenario says, "What would you do?" And it gives 3 choices. But the correct choice is always to stay near the elevator buttons, because the actual thing that the child should do, the answer explains, is to push the button to get off on the very next floor. And then as soon as they've pushed the button to get off on the next floor, then quickly push all of the buttons. Why would they do that? Because that buys them time. It makes the elevator stop at every floor, and then the child has time to run down the hall and yell, "Help, help," or knock on a door or whatever. Now that's the thing that children like to do, push all the buttons when they're on an elevator because it's an ornery thing to do and they think it's funny. But this is one situation where pushing all the elevator buttons is perfectly fine to do. We use acronyms in the book. One of them is scream, kick, yell. Because one of the situations is, if you get grabbed by somebody, what should you do? Well, the acronym for what they should do is scream, kick, yell. You can see here. Scream, kick, yell. The child is yelling, "Stranger, stranger, 911, help, I don't know this man." So the book explains what the child should do, and the answer choice, the correct choice, is to try to get away by screaming and kicking and yelling and kicking at the man until he can get away. If he is able to get loose of the child's grasp, he should crab crawl back and then run, continuing to yell, stranger, stranger, 911, I don't know this man. The important thing to remember is to try not to let the man take you away from the spot where he grabbed you, because if that would happen, that creates an even riskier situation. So that's the interactive chapter. What would you do? The 20 scenarios that a child could face. They have to choose the correct thing to do in each scenario to stay safe and take a proactive role in staying safe, because they're not with their parents in those situations. And then chapter 3 is what have you learned? And that's another acronym we call caution, action, tell. Caution means use caution. That means to be careful around people you don't know. Be alert, watch and think about people or places that might not be safe for you. Stay away from those people and those places. Because in the interactive chapter, chapter 2, you've learned, and chapter 1 and chapter 2, you've learned what category of people are safe to be around. So take cautions, to be cautious around the people that you don't know well, the people that you're supposed to treat as strangers. Then action, in the acronym caution, action, tell. Action means to do exactly that. Take action. You've learned what to do in the chapter 2, the 20 scenarios. You've learned what you're supposed to do. The child has learned what they're supposed to do in each one of those 20 situations. So take action to stay safe. Do what you've learned in chapter 2. Take action to stay safe. Make a stranger safety plan. Your stranger safety plan should include the very important steps of knowing who your trusted adults are, and with your parents' help, agree on a secret code word to form your ICE support group. This is one of the things I wanted to show you as well. When I would have school workshops, I would give out to the children this sheet that is the ICE support group. It has a place for them to put their own address, a telephone number, mother's and father's cell phone numbers, grandma and grandma's cell phone number, and then 3 places for trusted adults, people that you as a parent completely trust with your child. The child should put those 3 people's telephones number down. Then police, fire department, doctor, EMS, and so forth. So this is a good thing to have handy so that they will know. They will have the telephone numbers, maybe carry it with them in their backpack or whatever, so that they can call those people if they need to. That's their ICE support group. And then there's chapter 4, which is called What Puzzles You. You see the children at a table with a book appearing to be working puzzles. That's because that's what this chapter does. It's fun puzzles for them to use, but the puzzles are things that will help review them what they learned in the first 3 chapters. You have to fill in the word, and then the answers are given at the end of the book, but they're not supposed to peek. Solution to the word scramble puzzles, don't peek, or you won't learn anything from it. And then the 5th chapter, you see a happy family sitting there on the couch. What should parents do? What we learn in the 5th chapter is parents, in the 5th chapter, it's a reference to parents, grandparents, and other kinds of caretakers. It helps the parents, it explains to the parents what the children learned in the first 3 chapters, and the 4th chapter is the puzzles chapters, and tells them how they can help their child practice, review, and go over the strategies learned to stay safe. It also has useful information about links, references and links that they can use to give them additional support to help their children, and reminders about what they should do to how they can share the book with them, pick out different parts of chapter 2 if the child doesn't want to read the whole thing, or the child's too young to read the whole thing. It explains how they can help the child better understand everything in the first 3 chapters and help them practice it, rehearse it, maybe even rehearse the scream, kick, yell thing. When I wrote this book, What Would You Do? A Kid's Guide to Staying Safe in the World of Strangers, we weren't faced with a pandemic at that time, but now we are faced with a pandemic. And I have written a blog. All 4 of my books have a blog site that's associated with each one of my books. And the blog site that's associated with What Would You Do? A Kid's Guide to Staying Safe in a World of Strangers is called the Child Safety Blog. And I wrote a blog recently that's called Helping Children and Teens Deal with COVID-19 Anxiety and Quarantine, because the country's in such a flux now. Some parts of the country are back in school, some parts are in-person learning, and some children are having to do virtual learning again, just like they did last spring. And so it's difficult for parents. Parents have anxiety about it. Children have anxiety about it. So what the blog post that I put on there does is help parents help their parents help their children relax so they won't feel anxious. Help their children having to do virtual learning again. Have their children stay in contact with friends, maybe through social media. And if that's the case, if they have to deal with social, I want to say, first of all, the best way to get to that blog is my author website, Melissa Harker Ridenour Books. That's an easy one to remember, www.author Melissa Harker Ridenour, because that website has not only all the information about stranger safety and all the links and all the self-defense strategies and puzzles and games. There's a kids page, a parents page, a teachers page, puzzles and games, the things that have to do with stranger safety. But it also has links to all my blog posts, so you'll find that blog post here. Since they will be, when children are quarantined, since they will probably be trying to stay in contact with their friends by using computers, they're virtual learning, they're using computers more. So it makes sense that computer safety is of utmost importance. I do talk about that a little bit in this book. Internet safety. One of the things that it asks in chapter 2 is how to stay safe on the internet. It's question 3 in chapter 2. If you have a computer at home and you know how to use the internet, you might want to visit some fun websites. What would you do if you found an interesting website that asked you to list some personal information about yourself, such as your name, address, age, or phone number? Would you A, type in your name, address, age, and phone number? B, leave the answer boxes blank? C, ask your parents for permission to type in the requested information? They have to, the child should brainstorm and decide, what do I choose? A, B, or C? The correct answer, if you chose answer B, you made the safest choice. Asking parents first is a good answer too, but it would be better to never give out any information about yourself on the internet. Remember that you can't see the people that you come across in visiting websites. They are strangers to you. Be careful. Sometimes people on the internet pretend to be someone other than who they really are. Someone who says that he's a 12-year-old girl might really be an older man. If someone at a website would ask for photographs or information about you or ask to meet you, don't give out any information about yourself. Don't agree to any meetings and tell your parents right away. So that's one of the things that's brought up in the interactive chapter. And then because when children are in quarantine and having to use computers more for virtual learning and trying to keep in contact with their friends, it's important that parents know what to do to keep their children safe on the internet. So I address that in the chapter for parents and other caretakers. Help your children practice internet safety. Teach them never to give out personal information or photographs over the internet. Teach them that they must not trust or arrange to meet anyone they meet in a chat room. In addition, you might choose to have control access. Choose an online service provider or purchase software that allows you to block sites that you deem inappropriate for children, such as chat rooms, discussion groups, or bulletin boards. Monitor internet use by occasionally glancing over your children's shoulders to see what is on the screen. Look for signs of unease or nervousness, signs that something forbidden may be going on. After reviewing with your children the safety precautions and self-defense strategies explained in the first 4 chapters of the book, practice them with your children. And that includes practicing internet safety. Since the children will be using computers more, it's a good idea to practice internet safety because they can it's most children have computers in the rooms now, I realize that, but still ideally the best place to have a computer is a central location where parents can monitor what's going on to help their children be safe. I wanted to tell you, if you will indulge me for just a few minutes longer, I wanted to read you one of the best reviews that What Would You Do? A Kid's Guide to Staying Safe in a World of Stranger received. It was from the children's literature, editor of children's literature for Barnes & Noble. And this is what her review said, and I'd like to share it with you to help you understand, so that you will see that it is considered a good and effective book, and a good one to purchase to help empower your children and to help keep them take a proactive role to stay safe. And this is what the children's literature editor from Barnes & Noble said about my book. Her name is Kathy White. She says, "Every day strangers are seen. They are everywhere, in our neighborhood, at the stores, at church, near schools, and at parks. There are many types of strangers: tall, short, old, young, big, small, dark-haired, light-haired, male, female. But how does a child know which strangers are good ones and which ones are not? Children need to know how to identify someone who's a stranger, what to do if a stranger approaches them, and how to get help if needed." The author has written this unique, interactive book for kids to help them understand more about strangers. There are examples accompanied with questions and answers about what to do. For instance, one question deals with what would a child do if he or she usually walks home with a best friend, but one day the friend is not available. What would the child do? One of the wrong options is to walk home alone. In giving the answer, the author explains the correct response and why the other answers are not good choices. This kind of interaction allows a child to think about each circumstance and how he or she would handle it, as well as being able to discuss each question with his parent. The information given helps the child to learn the right way to deal with each situation so they will not be vulnerable to a stranger. When reading this enlightening book, children will have fun with the questions and puzzles. In addition, the illustrations are good visuals to show children what they can do. There's also an informational section for parents and references for additional material. This educational book should be read by all parents, teachers, and children. So I hope that gives you better insight as to how useful this book can be. This review says it's a useful book. I really appreciate your coming in and listening to me tell you about this book. I hope I didn't bore you. I wonder if any of you have any questions. Does anybody have any questions you want to ask?
Hi, Melissa, you did a great job. We don't have any questions. You covered the pandemic. You covered cyber safety, which is so important right now. And I want to thank you so much for coming on to Zoom into Books, and I hope you'll come back.
Thank you. I'm glad you stopped by to see about my book.